Okay, hello everyone. This is Colin Cox, and this is the week 13 audio lecture for English 1010. As you can see from the timestamp, this is a much shorter audio lecture than previous lectures simply because I don't have necessarily that much to discuss. I do want to offer some reminders and potentially some clarification in case any of you need that. There is an essay that I want to address, at least in part, before I finish today. So why don't we start with just a couple of reminders. The first thing I want to remind you is we are rapidly approaching the end of the semester. This is week 13. We have approximately 3 weeks left. That's including this week. And I would also remind you that your second benchmark is due by the end of this week. It is benchmark 2, which is the working works cited page. And in case you need any clarification about it, I would first direct you to the submission folder in the assignments tab. But what I basically want from this working works cited page is, as the title suggests, just a sense of where you are with your research, but I want it formatted like a works cited page. Now, there are both videos and documents on D2L. If you go to the research essay module, you'll see I provided a sample works cited page, at least a visual representation of what it should look like. But there's also a video in UJA about works cited pages. So just check and double check those resources. The biggest thing to remember is you cannot, for example, and my apologies if all of you know not to do this, but you cannot just list URLs. That's not what I want. MLA wants something a little more specific, and I'll talk about later today different formatting standards and expectations for the internet. For example, often the expectation is just a hyperlink, but that's not what I want, and that's not what MLA expects. So ensure that your works cited page looks the way I want it to look. And again, you have a variety of different resources at your disposal. Something else to remember, once you submit your working works cited page, that is your topic. I mentioned this, I believe, in an audio lecture a couple of weeks ago. You cannot change your topic after you submit your working works cited page, so please keep that in mind. If you do, I frankly will not accept that essay. So just remember that. And I haven't mentioned this before, but there are course evaluations. So if you would take a couple of moments and complete the course evaluation, you may do that through D2L. There's an announcement just in the general announcements feed about this. I believe I posted a specific announcement to this course's announcement feed. It is not obviously a requirement for you to successfully pass this course. Your grade, for example, is not connected to your willingness and ability to complete the course evaluation. But if you don't mind, it's extremely helpful and useful for me. I always appreciate and enjoy receiving feedback from my students. So take a few moments, complete the course evaluation if you do not mind. I would also remind you that if and when you have questions, because again, the research essay process is multifaceted, there's a lot to do. If you ever have any questions, do not hesitate to contact me, but take a second first and check the resources that I've made available both in the research essay module and on UJA. I've created a lot of videos addressing everything from how to navigate the online databases to how to successfully incorporate borrowed material. I completely understand having questions, wanting confirmation about how you do things. So definitely email me, but also take an opportunity if you have not and avail yourself of those resources. And remember, I posted one of those student analysis videos where I discuss a student essay, specifically a research essay. So take a couple of moments and watch that video as well, because many of you have confess that you find those videos extremely useful, hearing me talk about a particular text, something that's much closer to what I want you to submit. And that is there. It's there for you to use. So please do so if you have not already. Okay. let's take a couple of minutes and talk about the Daniel Ingber essay, Let Them Drink Water. And again, I know this is an essay that, at least as far as the publication date is concerned, is a bit older. But one of the things that I like that Ingber does is he quite successfully and quite seamlessly incorporates borrowed material into this essay, which does the work of enhancing and increasing the overall effectiveness of his argument. Again, regarding citation standards, because I think this is incredibly important, if you read this essay and think that this is an example of how I want you to cite your sources, then you would be mistaken, and I want to ensure that everyone understands this. The citation standards and expectations for an internet publication, they do not adhere, broadly speaking, to MLA documentation standards, even though a lot of what Ingber does is certainly the kind of thing that I want you to do, having, for example, readable, seamless transitional phrases, signaling to his reader when he borrows material. Of course, that's something that I want you to do, and that's something that each and every citation standard, whether it's MLA or APA, all of those different citation standards expect readability, but the specifics and the particulars of how to successfully cite information, that certainly does shift and change depending on the citation standards and the citation style you use. And what you find with internet publications, again, non-MLA internet publications, is this emphasis on and this expectation about and regarding hyperlinks, which is one of the reasons why you don't see a full works cited page at the end of Ingber's essay. Instead, you will see him link and hyperlink to his resources. So again, the way to think about this is he is doing the work of finding secondary sources, incorporating those sources into his essay, and signaling to his reader that he's incorporated borrowed material, but he's not creating in-text citations in the way you are, or in the way that I expect you to do, and he's certainly not creating a works cited page like I and like MLA expects you to do. So please keep that in mind, because I think that bit of clarification is extremely important, because again, I think if you read this essay thinking that this is an example of how to successfully cite sources, you would be wrong in a couple of key and important ways. But one of the reasons why I want you to read this essay, and one of the reasons why I think it is quite instructive, is, of course, this is an essay with a clear thesis statement. Ingber's not simply writing an informative research essay that does the work of explaining these particular taxes that were quite popular a little over a decade ago, regarding sugar consumption and or the amount of sugar in certain consumer goods like Coke, soda, etc. But I think Ingber is extremely effective at seamlessly incorporating borrowed material in a way that I would strongly encourage all of you to replicate. And I wanted to offer a couple of different examples. So if you look at, maybe this is the fifth or maybe the sixth paragraph that begins with junk food literally, I wanted to go ahead and just read that paragraph in its entirety and offer some commentary, because again, I think what Ingber is so incredibly effective at doing, at least as it relates to regarding borrowed material, is he quotes in a way and he borrows that is quite economical and efficient, and he's not overburdening you as the reader with borrowed material that, at least in its length and in its size and scope, is just unnecessary. So here's an example. Junk food literally, quote, alters the biological circuitry of our brains, writes David Kessler in this summer's bestseller, The End of Overeating. In a previous book, Kessler detailed his role in prosecuting the war on smoking as the head of the FDA. Now he's explaining what makes us fat with all of the magisterial jargon of cognitive neuroscience. Eating a chocolate-covered pretzel, he says, activates the brain's pleasure system. the dopamine reward circuit to be exact, and changes the, quote, functional connectivity among important brain regions. Thus, certain foods, the ones concocted by industrial scientists and laden with salt, sugar, and fat, can circumvent our natural inclinations and trigger, quote, action schemata for mindless eating. Got that? Junk food is engineered to enslave us. Kessler even has a catchphrase to describe these nefarious snacks. They're hyper palatable. So again, setting aside the larger argument of this piece, or the larger argument that Ingber makes and develops, what I really like about what he does here is he quotes and borrows from sources, and he does this in a variety of different ways at a variety of different times throughout this essay, but he presents all of this information in such an incredibly readable way. And again, I think it's important to keep in mind, because I provide examples in the research essay module of how to quote from the text, and I even provide some guidance about and regarding longer quotes, which is to say block quotes. But if I haven't emphasized this enough, I think it's important to remember to reserve those block quotes for moments when you think it's absolutely necessary. And I would even go as far as to say that block quoting, it's something you should do quite sparingly. It's something you should do only on the rarest of occasions. What you should instead do is the kind of thing, or deploy and adopt the kind of tactic that Ingber uses, or that Ingber demonstrates in this essay, which is a tactic that emphasizes quoting in a way that is minimal, quoting in a way that is economical, using partial quotes, and then using your creative faculties, which is to say your faculties as a writer, to fill those gaps. But what I also like that Ingber does, he provides a lot of information in a short and compact paragraph, which this is something that I really asked you to consider with essay 4 when I instituted those rather aggressive editing tactics, actually instituting a maximum word count for the first and only time this semester. And I think part of the reason why I wanted you to do that, or I can tell you part of the reason why I wanted you to do that, is because when writing a research essay successfully, when doing this well, you are using borrowed material in a precise and perhaps even surgical way, instead of just dumping large amounts of researched material on your reader. You're actually thinking about readability, because even though it's a research essay, and again, I think this is so important, and Ingber is so good at demonstrating this, even though it's a research essay, you should think about your audience as well. You should think about readability as well. And I'll provide another example. This is a bit earlier in the essay. I want to say this is the third paragraph. And again, pay attention to just how many different sources Ingber references in this compact short paragraph. So he writes, "The notion hasn't generated much enthusiasm in Congress, but fat taxes are spreading through state legislatures. 4/5 of the union now takes a cut on the sales of junk food or soda. Pleas for a federal fat tax are getting louder too. The New York Times recently endorsed a penny per ounce soda tax, and Michael Pollan has made a convincing argument for why the insurance industry may soon throw its weight behind the proposal. Even President Obama said he likes the idea in a recent interview with Men's Health. For the record, Stephen Colbert is against the measure. I do not obey big government. I obey my thirst." So there's a bit of humor there at the end. But once again, I would encourage you to pause and just notice the number of references, which is to say the number of resourced materials that Ingber uses, deploys, and references throughout this paragraph. But what you'll notice, again, just reiterating something I said earlier, he's not delivering this information in 3, 4, 5 line segments. He's finding a way to make this as readable and compact as possible. And to be frank, some of this is the product of certain, again, standards and expectations when writing for the internet. He was working within a certain compressed word count, I suspect, if I were to guess. And because of how editors for internet websites think about their readership and think about their audience, they want pieces to move at a particular pace that might not necessarily replicate the kind of pace you might see in a 30 or 40 page academic journal researched essay, for example. However, the thing that I really want to bring to your attention is simply how your essay reads, and in particular, how you sound when you integrate and deploy borrowed material. Because if you are doing it without any awareness of how it sounds and reads, then to some degree, you are not completing this assignment correctly. Again, I think all good writers think about their reader. And in particular, good writers who are writing research essays think about how their reader might receive borrowed material, which is to say, how they might hear it, how it might read, the degree to which they will understand the researched material as well as you as the person writing the essay does. So again, I think Ingber's essay is extremely effective at offering a model of perhaps even a kind of minimalist model, right, of how to incorporate borrowed material. You could certainly think about a maximalist model that just quotes that deploys one block quote after another because the writer thinks context is important, and they don't want to do perhaps what Ingber does, which is incorporate borrowed material in a way that leaves the reader maybe wondering, did this writer, did Ingber contextualize this information correctly and properly? But I would almost encourage you at least have that thought and have that conversation with yourself. Do I want to adopt a more maximalist approach like the one I just described, or do I want to adopt a more minimalist approach like Ingber seems to use and deploy? Because again, if you are not thinking about how you want to incorporate borrowed material and how it reads and how it sounds to your reader, then you haven't fully thought, at least in a robust way, about what makes for a good research essay. So those are just things that I want you to keep in mind. And again, I mentioned this at the beginning, this audio lecture will be a bit shorter than previous audio lectures because I am just doing the work of offering reminders and suggestions, giving you clarification or reminding you of where information might be on D2L. So I think that's where I want to leave it for today. If and when you have questions, do not hesitate to email me. But again, take a second and at least avail yourself of the resources I have made available on D2L in case those resources might answer that question for you. But okay, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. This is Colin Cox for English 1010, and I hope to talk to you soon.